Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. Let me start with, I moderated a discussion yesterday, Standard Chartered Bank, their global and their local economic outlook. And we'll be publishing some of the content from that session. But, Lamine, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Standard Chartered East Africa, made a very positive, vibrant, can-do presentation. We've already uploaded that onto YouTube. Do take a listen. It's about 11 minutes long, but well worth listening to. He's a friend, and I must say, a very incisive man. He spotted the likelihood of Trump winning the election when Trump was a rank outsider, rated at 1. 0 to 1 was the market, I think, on political betting sites at the time, and he took me through his thinking. And it was very ahead of the curve, and he is ahead of the curve in many respects. This Saturday, which is the 27th of January, we're hosting our first MindSpeak session of the year. We serve breakfast from 9:30 a.m. We're at the Intercontinental. It's a free-to-attend forum. Our guest is and I'm co-hosting it with Safaricom, and a friend of mine, Sandra Ojiambo, who is big in this conservation space. It's Eric Solheim, previously a Norwegian minister, peacemaker, and environmentalist. He's at Davos at the moment, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed that his flight is relatively an easy one. So 9:30 Intercontinental, very much looking forward to hosting him. He's going to speak about the entrepreneurial opportunity in conservation. Then Sander, who's co-hosting it with me, is going to speak about the unseen threat to business that the environment presents. The inspiration for MindSpeak came from a visit I made to Konya many years ago, and when I entered the Mevlana's museum, the following was inscribed: "Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving. It doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times. Come yet again. Come, come." Made a big impression on me, and one of the reasons I wanted to set up a forum where anybody could come in. We've had a tremendous following all these years, and I'm deeply grateful for that. Macro thoughts, let me start with Stanley Druckenmiller. Tends to be a lodestar in the markets for me. And he said, as a macro investor, my job for 30 years was to anticipate changes in the economic trends that were not expected by others, and therefore not yet reflected in securities prices. Steve Mnuchin made comments yesterday which surprised financial markets and turned the dollar's decline into a one-way bet. And we saw a seriously Hunter S. Thompson type market over the last 24 to 36 hours. And Stevie Bling, I call him, Mnuchin, gave it a big kick yesterday. Quote I'm referring to is, "While what a ride. Life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, loudly proclaiming, wow, what a ride." Put up a photograph of Stevie Bling Mnuchin and his other half. The song I imagine that is being played in that photograph that I've posted is Sophie Ellis Bextor, "Murder on the Dance Floor." Obviously, a weaker dollar is good for us as it relates to trade and opportunities, he told reporters in Davos. Euro traded above 124 for the first time since 2014 and is now above 124.50. I think, whatever happens with Draghi, we're going up to 126, given the momentum that has built up behind this move. Home thoughts, with things moving so fast, I need to be at my desk before 6 a.m. to avoid the melee on the Kiambu Road from where I commute, which is a crazy ecosystem of its own, a Mad Max world a once country lane which in the rush hour presents you with at least one life and death situation once a week. I went to the dentist about my teeth grinding habit, which is giving me nightmares, to be frank, and he told me, but Ali Khan, everyone is grinding their teeth in Nairobi, the stress from driving. This is a beautiful photograph which I had seen earlier, the sunset in Tanzania by Slide Visuals. This time Carol and Dosey saw it, and it really is lovely, isn't it? I like this. IKEA's new open source sofa is designed to be hacked, apparently. Skogafoss, and I've been wanting to go to Iceland for a while, is arguably the most aesthetically perfect waterfall in Europe, says David Yarrow. This image transcends all the others from the trip and offers a dreamlike portrayal of Iceland's raw and wild beauty. The Guardian, talking about Hugh Masekela, but I also like the photograph. Have you forgiven white people in South Africa? He was asked. And Masekela says, I don't think I have the power to forgive. Political reflections, I'm looking forward to it. Trump said he'd be willing to talk under oath to the special counsel, Robert Mueller. That is a singularly bad idea, in my opinion. Said he would love to talk under oath to special counsel Robert Mueller, who's investigating whether anyone close to the president colluded with Russia during the 2016 campaign. I would do it under oath, absolutely, Trump told reporters in a surprise appearance at a briefing Wednesday at the White House, and suggested that it might happen in 2 to 3 weeks. I'm looking forward to it, even though his Democratic rival Hillary Clinton didn't speak under oath when her use of private emails was investigated in 2016. Am I the only one who finds this photo offensive? Bible should not be hauled around as a threat. It's a holy book. This is Gabriel Dolan. Look, far from entering Canaan, the opposition, I'm afraid, are in the wilderness. What we're looking at now is a desperate need to decapitate leadership, find new leadership for the new age. Knesset to advance bid to muffle Muslim call to prayer, says the Times of Israel. Richardson quits Myanmar's whitewash Rohingya crisis panel. Veteran US diplomat Bill Richardson has resigned from an international panel set up in Myanmar to advise on the Rohingya crisis, saying it was conducting a whitewash and accusing the country's leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, of lacking moral leadership. The main reason I'm resigning is that the advisory board is a whitewash, he told Reuters in an interview, adding he did not want to be part of a cheerleading squad for the government. Suu Kyi's spokesman said the advisory board meeting was about the Rakhine issue. Apparently Richardson raised the issue of the journalists. Richardson talked on a topic outside the agenda of the meetings and went beyond the framework. And we feel sorry for his resignation due to the misunderstanding. You know, I think the most forthright comment that I've heard was really Bob Geldof, and that link is up there on Rich Rapparts, says that Aung Suu Kyi took the greatest prize humans can give to another, and then becomes one of the greatest ethnic cleansers on the planet. And I think he's got a point. US, after supporting South Sudan's leader, calls him unfit. US Ambassador Nikki Haley said Wednesday that the United States is giving up on South Sudan's president after backing the country's independence in 2011 and investing over $11 billion, calling him an unfit partner in the pursuit of peace and urging an arms embargo on the conflict-racked nation. She cited President Kiir for almost immediately violating a December 21st ceasefire that took effect 3 days later, for blocking aid to millions in need despite a promise of free and unhindered access, and for last month's promotion of 3 generals sanctioned by the UN Security Council in 2015 for leading the slaughter of civilians. In a hard-hitting speech to the Council, Haley called the general's promotion a slap in the face of the Council of Nations that supported the Kiir government and a basic decency. Attempts to ease the suffering of the South Sudanese people aren't working, she said, and what's worse, were failing, not despite the leadership of South Sudan, but because of it. The time has come to acknowledge the hard reality the leaders of South Sudan are not just failing their people, they are betraying them indeed. This is a photograph of the VIP room at Juba Airport I took in 2011. International markets, take a look at this chart of European bond yields, that's from Holger. If this current run in Chinese H shares extends to 25 straight days, it'll do the first part, I'll do the first part of my share in Mandarin, says David Inglis. Marriott's CEO says the US is less welcoming to travelers under Trump, and this is an important point. You know, what is going to happen with the tourism side? I haven't done any analysis, it would be interesting if somebody has. On the 2nd of January, when I was sort of sketching my roadmap for this year, I said the portfolio will own the euro. I was looking for 130 plus versus the dollar in 2018. And I said we'll own the rand as its main long-term holding. I believe the rand has been savaged by President Zuma, I said, and that a President Ramaphosa will mean an erosion in the Zuma haircut and a substantial reprice in the value of the rand. I also propose we hold some meticals. The portfolio will also keep funds aside to be traded on a tactical and short-term basis. Opportunities abound in the FX markets, I said. The frequency of flash crashes in the early hours has been unprecedented. The FX markets are a 24-hour market. Whilst I propose to get some shut-up, I propose the portfolio allocates one human resource to monitoring things whilst the world sleeps. I haven't done that yet, so it's been me being up all hours. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro just topped 124.50, but we're back at 124.43. Dollar index around the 89.03 level. Japanese yen, 108.85. Swiss franc, last time I looked, 0.9428. The pound, which has been on a roll, we're above 143 now, 143.10. The Australian dollar, where's that, 0.8111. India rupee 63.495, South Korean won 1060.85, Brazilian real 3.1465, Egyptian pound 17.6850, and the rand bust through that level of mine, 12, last seen at 1188, and I'll come to the rand in a minute. Dollar index, take a look at this chart, we're at multi-year lows, it's fallen in a straight line, Mnuchin didn't help either. I think the target, as I said earlier in the year, is 88. I think Super Mario Draghi runs out of road today. Even if he's dovish, it's not going to make any difference. Ongoing dollar plunge makes risk return of short euro dollar ahead of dovish ECB especially attractive, says Zero Hedge. And I responded by saying, alternatively, we're going to have a Kuroda yen earlier in the week redux, and the next stop is 126. This is a chart from Rafi, who really called the euro dollar, and amongst other things, he called Ripple very early. This is his chart, 124.34 trading last. As I said, I'm no longer bullish Bitcoin. I wrote about it severally. And I turned bearish on the 27th of November before we saw that awesome run up. But you know, I suggested you buy it below 1,000, so you know, I'm not too concerned about that. As T.S. Eliot said in The Hollow Men, between the idea and the reality, between emotion and the act falls the shadow, for thine is the kingdom. Commodity markets, Brent crude, well over $70, $70.55 last, as I called it on the 13th of November last year, when I expected it to cross $70. I set a $70 price target. I like to think I was one of the first people to do that. And we saw Brent crude almost at $71, a level not seen since early December 2014. Standard Chartered yesterday were predicting that Brent crude averages $61 in 2018. That OPEC, they said, has been on top of their game, and shale production, they think, will be simply off the scale and will damp down this very big price rally run up we've seen of late. US crude futures settled at $65.61. We're now at $66.20. In January, again, in my roadmap, I said that in November I turned bullish on oil, and I was forecasting a further run higher towards $65 a barrel in New York. And that was the trade, actually. I was just looking for it to hit 65. I was going to book it. That would have been a 12.5% return. When you annualize it, it's pretty grand. So in a way, I'm sidetracked, but I still think we're headed higher. Gold now, what a run higher, 1364 trading lots. Look at the chart and see that rally started at 1240. Emerging markets Lula verdict pretty much sent every asset class in Brazil into a massive frenzy. That's David Inglis. Bond yields fell through the floor. The stock market was up 3,000 points. The currency had its best day since May last year. Sub-Saharan Africa, excellent article in the FT by David Peeling. Southern Africa, he says, faces a full-scale revolution. He says there is great upheaval, not to say a full-scale revolution going on in South Africa. This week, the spearheads of that change are setting out their stall in Davos. The new leaders of three of Africa's most established liberation movements in Angola, South Africa and Zimbabwe will use a visit to the Swiss Alps to try to persuade the assembled money wads that their countries are back in business. The best of the three is Cyril Ramaphosa. Having supplanted Jacob Zuma as president of the ANC, though not as yet as president of South Africa, expectation is high that he can reverse the rot of the Zuma years. Rot it was. Mr. Ramaphosa's party's ideologically split has moved quickly to prod the ANC in a new direction. Sensing the shifting tide, the ANC's National Executive Committee is seeking to ease Mr. Zuma from the state presidency. If it acts quickly enough, it could even clear the way for Mr. Ramaphosa, a former union boss turned wealthy businessman, to make the State of the Nation address in 2 weeks' time. If that happens, the rand will be at 11. Mr. Ramaphosa, who was Mr. Zuma's deputy, has been criticised for being overly cautious. Following his narrow victory in ANC elections in December, he has moved swiftly in his first big speech. Meanwhile, Mr. Zuma has been obliged to allow judicial inquiry into state capture. Then they're talking about Emerson Mnangagwa, aka the Crocodile, who in November ousted Robert Mugabe as president of Zimbabwe after 37 years in the wings. He's bullish about that as well. Mnangagwa has been affected. And then finally, Mr. Lourenço, widely expected to be a Dos Santos stooge, has turned out to be not like that at all. And that's something else I'm feeling bullish about. Referencing Africa Eurobond spread convergence, Razia Khan, investors think Africa is a country. She's right, look at that graph and you see what she means. Debt maturities are concentrated between 2022 and 2024, she said. She's right. She also said if we hadn't seen the rebasing of GDPs in Africa, the debt to GDP would look a lot worse indeed. New Zimbabwe leader orders top officials to declare their assets. Angola's new Terminator president vows to kill corruption. The Dos Santos family anticipated change. What none of the family, I think, recognized was that change would come so quickly. That he's earned the nickname the Terminator, and so they've been removed out of their positions much more quickly than anybody would have imagined. Rafael Marques de Moraes, prominent journalist and anti-corruption campaigner, says he believes Lourenço's moves only serve to distract from his lack of an economic plan. I think that's harsh. He says the president's children were only the tip of the iceberg, and he only dealt with the tip of the iceberg. And now people are realizing that he has not terminated the iceberg, but he's just broken some ice. I think at this point, people are realizing that this is just a show because he doesn't have a clear economic policy. I don't think that's correct. I like what I'm seeing in Angola. I think we need to be long Angola Eurobonds. They're also opening up fuel imports with the first major tender. So really trying to change things quickly. About South Africa, on the 18th of December last year, I said, will it be 1994 all over again? We can all remember the moment when Mandela came out of prison, blinking in the sunlight and assumed leadership. I also said Ramaphosa could well be the ignition for returning South Africa back to that incredible moment full of promise. On that point, 1984, this is my favorite photograph of Nelson Mandela, but you need to watch this business Bloomberg interview at Davos with Cyril, because the Tsar will surely explode towards 10 once people have watched it. The wheels of change are moving now, and they're going to start speeding up, he said. Said the authorities are intensifying their attack on pervasive corruption and are having positive discussions with investors about the future of Africa's largest country. We have taken a view that this is a very, very difficult matter, he said, when asked if Zuma would sell out his term. We've decided we're going to manage the transition very carefully. What we don't want to see is him treated with disrespect. We will manage it so well that it does not divide the nation. And it's a great interview he's given. Global investors will surely buy the rand, I said in December, by the bucket load. And I was then saying we're going to rally through 12. We've cracked 12. Look, rand cracks 12 for the first time since 2015. South African all shares up 3.56% year to date, and that too is at all-time highs. Dollar rand, I'm looking for 10, frankly. Egyptian pound 17.6850. Nigerian all share up 14.96% this year, coming off the boil a little bit. Ghana has now overtaken Nigeria. It's on 15.97%. And I suspect that is the best performing stock market in the world. JP Morgan plans expansion into Kenya and Ghana. You'll see us open in some countries we're not in. In Africa, you'll be hearing about some of that stuff, Jamie Dimon said on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Lamine, in his opening remarks, struck a very optimistic note, and generally people are positive. They are. The central bank governor says our nouveau riche are so excited about the Bitcoin thing and they're putting their money there, it is dangerous. He says the central bank will not be held liable for losses incurred by consumers using digital currencies to settle transactions, since the virtual currency is not legal tender in the country. I've been quite clear about our views on Bitcoin, indeed he has. And the Bitcoin-like items, from our perspective, that is something we cannot support. Citibank recently warned that Kenyans have accumulated holdings estimated at more than 163 billion shillings, which could cause widespread disruption to the economy were the non-official currency to collapse. I think it's going to halve from here. We're right now at 11,400, so that's a very worrying number. Nairobi all shares up 4.81% this year. The NSE 20 is up 0.3% this year. And I will take your leave. Thank you once more for stopping by.